Hmm. It looks like my new team has a new symbol for my mute button is on. Is that other people have that where it's just a tiny little X? Jane, pay attention. It was weird. Okay. All right. All right.
I had to leave for a minute because I didn't have sound.
I you said you had to leave, but I thought you said I hit delete. I was like, that also happens. We're just like, oh, I think I'm just going to delete everything. All right. So I'm not calling the meeting to order quite yet. I'm getting a lay of the land. Who is presenting and who needs to be, um,
Council President, I'll be
St. Paul City Council budget meeting to order. Welcome and good morning on a beautiful autumn day in St. Paul. Holly, I don't know if do we record these? There it is. Recording has started, just like magic. Um, yes, and today our order of business is to dig into our CIB budget. There's been a lot of rethinking around CIB in advance of this year's budget, and I know in concert with lots of conversations in the years leading up to it. I'm interested to learn more. I'm interested to see how it lays out into our annual budget. I know that one thing that our council colleagues have all expressed quite a few times throughout the years and also in this budget process is just our strong desire to make sure that we don't fall further behind on our maintenance. We know that bright, shiny objects are exciting and fun to fund, but there's no point in putting up bright, shiny objects if we let them go um, to the pits in the years that's subsequent years. So we are really focused on kind of the unjazzy thing that goes along with making investments, and that is taking care of them. So we'll be interested in hearing that side of it as well. For presenters, I know that Tara Bernock will be opening up. Madeline Mitchell will be doing our presentation today. For both of our presenters, I can keep an eye on my colleagues, and if you just, as you come to the end of a section, just want to take a quick pause, I'll help manage our flow of our conversation. And then if it's something that we're going to be coming up to in a slide or two, feel free to just say, I'm coming to that, and we'll get to it when we get to it, rather than try to jump around on your presentation. Sometimes there is a method to the madness, so we do recognize that. So thank you for being here today. This is an important piece of our city budget. So we're excited to have you here as we get to the end of our discussion with departments and particular programs and set our final budget in the first few weeks of December. So we're getting there. It's November. We're through the other side of the election and there's lots of work still to do. So welcome, Ms. Bernock. Why don't you take it away and then we'll move to Ms. Mitchell. Welcome.
Terrific. Good morning, Council President and Council members. We are here to present on the 2022 proposed capital improvement budget. My name is Tara Baranock, and I'm the budget manager in the Office of Financial Services. The important highlight of the mayor's proposed budget is that the proposed budget accelerates funding for three major capital projects: the North End Community Center, Hamlin Midway Library, and Fire Station 7. I will turn it over to Madeline Mitchell, the budget analyst, who has been expertly shepherding the capital improvement process for a number of years. She will be presenting a summary of the capital proposal, information on each of the three major projects, and then she will touch on road and bridge projects, CDBG funding, and the upcoming 2022 community process for the community project allocation. So I will hand it over to Madeline.
Thank you. Good morning, Council President Brenmo and council members. My name is Madeline Mitchell. I'm a senior analyst in the Office of Financial Services. Today, I will be walking us through the 2022 proposed capital budget. Oh, there we go. So as Tara mentioned, probably the most exciting part of this capital budget for this year is that it features a new 5-year strategy, which takes advantage of today's low interest rates to fund 3 major projects over the next 2 years: the Hamlin Midway Library, the North End Community Center, and Fire Station 7. We'll be using a combination of capital improvement bonds and public safety bonds to finance these 3 projects for a total of $42 million in 2022 and 2023. The total capital budget is $55 million, which includes the CIB and public safety bonds, as well as municipal state aid and other sources like county and federal contributions. Here we have a high-level summary of the major revenue sources in the capital budget. Capital improvement bonds, street reconstruction bonds, and municipal state aid typically make up most of our capital budget financing. We also have $4 million per year in community development block grants, CDBG funds, $8 million in sewer revenue bonds, and as mentioned earlier, various amounts from county, state, and federal governments. And here you can see the timing of the new 5-year capital plan. So while we typically budget $11 million per year for capital bonds, you can see we're front loading our bonding into the first 2 years. So then in the out years, in 2024 to 2026, those years will be pared down. Overall, we will maintain that average of $11 million a year. It'll just be spread over the next 5 years for $55 million total. So the focus is on the 3 major projects that we'll get into a little bit later, but there are also some smaller amounts used for a couple other projects, as well as steady funding for annual programs. So each year, the capital improvement budget dedicates a portion of our capital improvement bonds towards what we call annual programs, which are some of the city's ongoing capital needs. This slide shows those programs and their proposed funding amounts for the next 5 years. The majority of these programs are in parks or public works, but all departments with capital assets can apply for funding via the capital maintenance process, which is that first item on the list here. We are currently in the middle of that allocation process. Departments have submitted proposals that will be evaluated over the next month. The total here is $3.9 million for these annual programs, which is up from $3.7 million in 2021 and $3.8 million the year before in 2020. In recent years, annual programs have made up around 37% of our $11 million in capital improvement bond budgets.
Ms. Naker has a question.
Thanks, Council President. Ms. Mitchell, do we keep track of how much of each of these budgets is used by the departments each year and how much we're rolling over from year to year?
We do. We check in with them. We can get that information for you. I don't have it here today.
I'd appreciate that. I know that the CIB committee sent us a memo expressing some dissatisfaction with the fact that there are so many annual program set-asides, and I'd be curious just to better understand how those funds are utilized each year.
Yeah, absolutely. We can get that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. So this slide shows the city department bond funded projects included in the accelerated 5-year capital plan. In 2022, there's $640,000 for parks deferred maintenance need. This is in addition to the park specific annual programs that we showed on the previous slide. Also for parks is $5 million in 2022 and $11 million in 2023 for the North End Community Center. There's just over $8 million for the Hamlin Midway Library, $600,000 in both 2022 and 2023 for Gold Line bus rapid transit and pedestrian improvements, $549,000 for safe routes to school at Bruce Bento Elementary, and then in the later years, $630,000 for a sidewalk infill project and $231,000 left over for other projects in 2025. Also on this list, you'll see further down Fire Station 7, which will be funded by public safety bonds at a total of $8 million over the next 2 years. Here again, you can see in that bottom right corner that the total is $55 million or $11 million on average, but the first 2 budgets are obviously a lot higher than years 3 through 5.
Ms. Mitchell, quick question, and this is for the benefit of my colleagues and also anyone who's watching, but and frankly, just so that I have a clear understanding, the I know, for example, that the North End Community Center is making a strong pitch at the state legislature for bonding. Um, and I'm going to put my optimistic hat on and assume we're going to get that money. I know it's got a lot of support there. So what happens if we get $11 million from the state legislature and we don't have to fund 2023 portion of the North End Community Center?
Thank you, Council President Brenmo. And my understanding is that those funds will be freed up for other projects. But I would also defer to Director McCarthy if there's anything else any other nuance there.
And I'm assuming likewise, I'll give you a minute, John, if you want, but I'm assuming likewise then if, this doesn't preclude the city from pursuing any other sources. And hopefully it won't hurt us in pursuing other sources because, oh, well, we see it's in your budget for 2023. So why would we, I want to make sure we understand that, but also know that we are looking at federal infrastructure, that we're looking at the state legislature, that we're looking at for other funding sources to fill some of these gaps with the fire station and et cetera. So just understanding how those things knit together would be helpful. And John, you turned on your camera, so I assume that means you're ready to knock it out of the park.
Well, Council President Brenmo, thanks for that vote of confidence. I was going to agree with pretty much everything that you just said and what Ms. Mitchell noted that, and just adding that this is a competitive process and there's always a list of projects that don't get funded through this process. I know earlier in the council budget process, you've all highlighted the need for additional funding for deferred maintenance and city facilities, and that's absolutely a place that we could, frankly, could put all of these resources towards. So, there's other big individual projects on the list of projects that weren't funded, and then we know just the ongoing maintenance needs as well. Great. But yeah, absolutely, we're always pursuing other sources for any of these projects, including partnering with the Friends of the Library and other outside funding opportunities that could potentially free up some of our own money.
And I would just say, I appreciate the acknowledgement in this budget that we can't hold out and wait for other projects, and so we're incorporating it into our budget, and then also that the intention is there to continue to work hard to get those resources, because I do, as I said at the start, and you just repeated this, we know that we're behind on other maintenance items and other smaller projects. So just I think that should strengthen our resolve to get these resources, external resources, to help get the capital projects. As I said, they're fun to fund. So, it's this is an opportunity for our elected officials to shine and bring capital projects into the city. And so I do think that there's a nexus there. I see Ms. Prince has hands up, and then Ms. Naker.
And I would be remiss as library board chair to say that were that to happen, that some of these projects were to be funded through a federal earmark or the bonding bill at the state, that Hayden Heights and Riverview libraries are in the wings for their allocations to be upgraded as quickly as we can.
Absolutely. That's a charge to all of us to make sure we can get more dollars outside so that we can do those other libraries as well. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. Two quick questions, and the first one might be more for Director Hom, I think, but back to the point about taking care of what we have and not just running after the new and the shiny. I am really concerned about this zeroing out of the park's deferred maintenance from 2023 on. And I'm wondering if, Director Hom, maybe you can speak to what the impact of that will be. And then I'm also just wondering from our finance staff, it looks like the bulk of our 5-year spending is being concentrated in 23. And I'm just wondering what the reasoning is for that rather than spreading it out more evenly over the years to come.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Naker, I do appreciate the question and the acknowledgement in this conversation of deferred maintenance as well as capital replacement and new construction. Repeating some of the things that were covered in the parks budget conversation, overall, this is a really strong capital budget for parks because the North End Community Center is moved up and we can proceed with planning for it and constructing it, taking out the risk of escalation and the major costs that affect any large capital project if you put it off for years and have inflation. As it relates to deferred maintenance, I'll echo what Director McCarthy said, that should we be successful with the federal pursuits or the state pursuits where this advances that conversation, our next priority would be doing deferred maintenance. I mean, the net effect is there is a little over $500,000 that's not available to do maintenance on our built infrastructure, and the impact that has on service life is a big deal. I think the trade-off in this case is worth it, and the net cash benefit to the city is worth it. I will also say on the overall notion of deferred maintenance and annual programs that this budget does maintain as a baseline, the annual programs for tot lots, for asphalt, for trees, for the basics that we look for to fund those programs. Those are not in our operating budget. It would be great if there were more resources there, but as a baseline, that is a good starting point heading into this 2-year cycle.
Does that answer your? Yep, Mr. McCarthy.
Well, Council President Bremmo and Councilmember Naker, to answer part 2 of the 2-part question there around the increase in spending in 2023. This was a bonding plan that we put together to match kind of the anticipated project cash flows for these 3 big projects. We will adjust the bonding if needed to match up with when departments anticipate actually spending those dollars down, and that's really the major shift that we're doing here is more of a cash flow financing model to line up with when we think dollars will go out the door, rather than where we have sometimes bonded for the whole capital project all at once, or a piece of it, and then had to wait till we had full funding. So we're lining up, kind of the design dollars out the door along with construction and inspection costs. And that's what the cash flow shows here. But we have the ability to make adjustments depending on kind of project progress as we go. And I want to just reiterate what Director Hom noted, that to answer your previous question, Councilmember Naker, about annual programs, that the annual programs really are maintenance programs for both parks and public works. So being able to keep full funding or an adequate level of funding for those programs throughout the 5-year cycle that we're showing here does give us continued ability to chip away at some of those maintenance needs.
I know we hear all the time, like, oh, why don't we just put a bike path from here to here? It's only 4 blocks, or it's only 6 blocks. And, those 6 blocks here and 6 blocks there do add up over time. And if we don't maintain them, they're not usable. And so I really think it's important. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think that just underscoring our commitment to making sure that we maintain the facilities that we have. In addition to improving the ones that we are currently using, and adding new infrastructure to replace old infrastructure that doesn't work for us anymore. But it's when we're tripping on our sidewalks, and our paths don't have the cracks go untreated. You can't use them when you're on a bike or rollerblades or what have you, so they're not useful anymore. So we're really in alignment on this issue, and I appreciate that explanation. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. And just as a quick follow-up on that point, I mean, I appreciate those responses, Director McCarthy and Director Hom. I am still really concerned about not having that deferred maintenance. I understand those other annual programs are there, but they're always there. So it's a net loss in terms of maintaining what we have. So I would really like to find, and this is more to my colleagues, a way to be able to continue to take care of more of what we have, knowing the Amoresco study, knowing how many of those facilities are kind of slipping into the red, so that we're not just investing in new things in parks, but also maintaining what we have.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks for the pause, Ms. Mitchell. There are probably more to come, but I think we can roll forward at this time.
Okay, thank you. So next we'll get into a little more about these big three projects that are being funded over the next 2 years. So the accelerated 5-year capital plan includes a total of $16 million for the new North End Community Center located at 1025 Rice Street. And prior to this allocation, this project received $4 million in funding through the CIB process. Design and construction work, or design and community engagement work, started back in 2019. The construction documents are nearly complete and will be ready to go by the time funding is available. If all of these funding levels are approved, construction could start as early as next spring with a summer or fall 2023 potential opening date. And I know the Parks Department is really excited to offer a number of amenities at the new center, including new programming, new artificial turf, geothermal energy, solar panels. This next slide here is the renderings of the new entrance at Rice and Lawson and the community space. And this slide shows the entire park complex and how it'll be situated in relation to existing buildings and streets. You can see the variety of fields and courts, a playground, a water feature, parking areas, open green space. I believe, yeah, Director Hom is still on the call if there's any additional questions about this project. Or anything he'd like to add.
It doesn't look like there's questions per se. I would personally like to add that my colleagues know that I've been a champion for this project for a long time. But this work is really being done in concert with Ramsey County's very innovative and forward-thinking and I think bold work on reimagining Rice Street itself. The North End has more modest housing stock, has a very large immigrant refugee community, and is a history of not really standing up for itself when it comes time for getting funding and finding investment for the community. It is split between 3 representative districts, 2 Senate districts, and the school district itself's line cuts right down the middle of the neighborhood, which makes it a very fragmented community that needs all the extra love and support we can give it. And with the new incoming changes on Rice Street, we're looking to change that main street to what feels like a main street in a small town versus a commuter route for people to leave St. Paul and go to the suburbs. And so I think this is a huge deal and a big opportunity. Speaking specifically about the future, the North End Center itself, you saw some of the features and the pictures are amazing, but you know, I love the things like the Staratorium, and like it's definitely a place to see and be seen. Right now we have a partnered rec center that's in the side of a school that is potentially part of the Envision closures. This is a community center that will serve people of all ages and be a gathering spot and a center for the community. One of the things that was not highlighted that I'm most proud about is that in designing this building, we went kind of beyond the gym as a basketball court model and really talked about what is missing in our rec services and what is a popular and in demand, and that is in the East Side and North End has been badminton and volleyball. And so this gym is really designed and oriented towards what has traditionally been girls' sport powerhouse in St. Paul, but badminton and volleyball. And so the gym is adaptable to have tournaments and to be able to host those events as well as just the traditional kind of basketball format. So it's really exciting. It feels like we're at if we're shovels in the ground next spring and opening up in 2023, that'll be around the time that the street gets constructed and underway. And I think it will be magically transformative for this neighborhood that is well overdue for this kind of large and super thoughtful investment. So I appreciate folks' support, and I just wanted to give an extra commercial for it because I'm reporting to the St. Paul delegation today to make sure that it's on the top of their priority list, and then on the state bonding tour in a couple weeks. So working hard to free up those $11 million that we currently have budgeted in the city's side of the ledger so that we can use those for other resources, but very committed to getting this long overdue building and amenity built for the North End. Are there other questions or comments about this project? Is there anything you want to add, Mr. Hom?
Council President Brenmo and council members, I appreciate the opportunity. I will just underscore the investment the city's already made in community, working with Snow Krylik Architects, our youth commission, this neighborhood to put an innovative design that was born out of Community First. Snow Krylik is the same firm that worked with community at CHS Field, and they've done an excellent job. And people in my chair often talk about a project being shovel ready. Our community's investment in this, the council's previous investment in this, has this project truly shovel ready, that if our partnerships with the other units of government, state and local infrastructure programs come through, we are ready to go and put services in community and put jobs on constructing this project in the North End pretty much immediately. So I will just underscore that and appreciate the attention and support.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, appreciate that. All right, what's next?
All right. Next up, we have the Hamlin Midway Library. In 2020, $500,000 was allocated to the libraries for design work across several libraries, one of which was the Hamlin Midway Library. The new five-year plan includes $1 million in funding in 2022 and 7.1 in 2023 for a total of 8.1 million. Given that the design funding in 2020 was spread among 3 facilities, it's not included in this total here, but there was some amount of that was dedicated to Hamlin Midway. The Hamlin Midway Library is 91 years old, has a lot of structural and maintenance concerns, including moisture problems and air quality issues. Due to an outdated ventilation system, it was the only library in the city that was closed for more than a year during the pandemic. And due to the library's design, there are significant accessibility challenges and a real lack of flexible community space. So there's a need to re-envision this building and the way it serves community. The St. Paul Public Library will be continuing its community engagement process and design work through the end of 2021 and into 2022. And they're going to be exploring 2 potential options for this site: a radical renovation that adds additional space to the existing structure, or building a new, larger, more accessible facility. These photos show some of the issues of the existing building. On the left, you can see the accessibility challenges by the entrance to the community meeting room. And on the right, you can see that there's some water on the floor in the community room. And this slide shows some exposed rebar and spalling concrete, more water damage in the community room. And on the right, you can see that the accessible entrance is that side door. And I don't believe we have anybody from libraries on the call today, but I know you all heard a very thorough presentation on this project recently. So if there are additional questions, we can follow up with them directly. Otherwise, I will move on to Station 7.
Great, and thanks. We did get a presentation at the library board meeting, so there's not lack of interest, it's just that we are well informed on this item. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so finally, the third of the big 3 projects we have is Fire Station 7, which received some funding in 2019 and 2020, but the majority of the construction funding will be the $1.1 million in 2022 and 6.9 million in 2023 for a total of 9 million. This existing station is 91 years old, and like the library project, has some pretty significant issues. The current building lacks the appropriate space and facilities to foster gender equity and employee safety. It also lacks appropriate separation between living spaces, apparatus bays, decontamination areas, and storage areas, which can lead to increased exposure to carcinogens. A new station would allow the fire department to address those concerns, as well as locate a ladder truck, fire engine, district chief, rescue squad, ALS ambulance, and BLS ambulance at this station. This slide here is a map of structure fire calls citywide, and it really illustrates the high demand for fire services in the area served by Station 7, which is the largest red dot on the east side over there. And this slide here is shows the sleeping quarters at the station. These spaces are separated by just cabinets and curtains, resulting in very little privacy. And then this slide shows how equipment is stored right in the bay with the vehicles, meaning a lot of exposure to exhaust and other chemicals for those who are using those spaces. And I believe we have Chief Inks on the call if there are any additional questions about this station. Otherwise, I will continue.
Ms. Prince has a hand up.
Thank you, Council President Brenmone. I just wanted to say how much it means to me and to the people I represent, and I'm sure the whole East Side, that we are finally able to move ahead on this project. A couple of years ago, the Women's Employee Resource Network had lunch over at Station 7 so that they could see how inadequate it was for just in terms of the privacy issue, the fact that it just wasn't a reasonable place for people to be. The dorm space was terrible. The workout rooms, the restroom space, showers, etc., were just really inadequate. The other thing is, and Madeline, thanks so much for showing the structure fire map. You know, as we all know, the East Side includes much of our city's oldest wood frame housing. And also because we have areas of concentrated poverty, it's wood frame housing that isn't necessarily well maintained. So losing the fire engine back in 2016 was really devastating for the community, that there wasn't enough room in the building to have a medic, which we definitely needed, and we did get a super medic, so that was great. But being able to bring that fire engine back and to have the building fully equipped with good dorm space is just going to make a huge difference for the East Side. So I'm really pleased that this is part of the mayor's proposal, and I appreciate my colleagues' support if you are able to provide that, and definitely talk to me if you have any questions as well.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. Are there questions for Ms. Prince or Chief Inks, who is on the call with us today? And I just want to reiterate that these it's an interesting approach to CIB, but it just seems to make so much more sense than sitting on piles of millions of dollars waiting to amass the right amount of money to move forward when we have needs that exist in the city. So I'm glad we're moving forward with this. I don't think there's a quarrel on any of these projects as to their need, as to their prioritization. There's, as Ms. Prince pointed out, there's stuff right behind them ready to fill in the queue when they come along. So I really do appreciate having a better understanding of what we're looking at here in terms of what our priority projects are and how we're going to speed these up in terms of getting them done, and also the commitment to find additional funds to offset the city's portion of the cost. I see Ms. Naker has a hand up.
Thanks, Council President. I'm curious on that note. I completely agree that it makes sense to not have money allocated to projects that actually don't have enough allocated yet to move forward, and to just allocate the amount we need and do the projects over 5 years. I also know that we're taking advantage of good interest rates to do this in this particular 5-year period. But I guess I'm wondering from our finance staff whether this is a plan that we intend to continue to implement going forward, that is, regardless of the interest rates, to try to get projects actually done and allocate as much as is needed to them, rather than allocating not enough and sort of sitting on that until it accumulates to be enough to do the project. That just seems to make sense to me in any period of time.
Mr. McCarthy.
Council President Bremo and Councilmember Naker, it's a really good question, and I think these 3 big projects in particular are ones that have been on the list for a long time, as we've noted already. So we kind of had good momentum going with these 3 projects because a lot of work had been done, the design work, the community engagement on all of these, and they've been in the queue and kind of blocking our ability to, we knew we kind of had to make a call on these three big projects because they're blocking other projects on the list. And so and with the low interest rates that you referenced, it made a lot of sense to take this approach this year. I think we want to see how this goes, and we'll evaluate it going forward. I think when we have big projects like this, I think it does make a lot of sense to pursue this strategy going forward. But I think it's pretty project dependent and kind of based on what our specific needs are at the time. And we know, as we've talked a lot about, that deferred maintenance is another need. And so we may, it may be something that we kind of alternate depending on what the project mix is on a given year. But I think laying out this 5-year plan allows us to get a lot of things done over this 5-year horizon that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do if we didn't take this approach. So, yeah, I think we absolutely are excited to try this new approach and see how it goes going forward.
Great, thanks. I appreciate that. And I just always appreciate kind of taking a closer look at some programs that have been the way that they are for a long time, and just challenging how effective they are. So I appreciate this. And I also appreciate that if it doesn't work, that we're not stuck doing this forever. But that it's time to look at these things a little bit differently, because it is just sitting on piles like a dragon, piles of gold coins, and not moving forward doesn't seem to make sense. I just want to see if Chief Inks would like to chime in before we move on.
Council President Brenmoen, rest of the City Council, really nothing to add except just a huge thank you for keeping this project moving forward and hearing us for the last X amount of years on how important it is, not only to the east side, but the rest of the city, as building this station will allow us to put the proper resources in there, create an equitable space, but also free up some space in other parts of the city that we can utilize to build resources in as well. So just a big thank you is all I wanted to say. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Council President, council members. Moving on to Public Works projects. So in addition to the couple of smaller projects that you saw earlier that are funded with our capital improvement bonds, the overall capital improvement budget includes $15 million in street reconstruction bonds for the St. Paul Streets program and $14 million in municipal state aid funding from the state of Minnesota. The projects funded by those sources are listed here. And then I know Public Works will be back to speak to them in, I'm sure, much greater detail at their presentation next week. The next two slides we have here show proposed budgets for community development block grant funding. We receive $4 million each year from HUD, which is allocated out to community partners and city departments. This slide shows the community partner funding levels. So we have $190,000 for each of the 3 NeighborWorks projects in 2022 and $210,000 in 2023. We have $500,000 for Dayton's Bluff neighborhood housing services in 2022, and then $675,000 in 2023, $190,000 in both years for the East Side Neighborhood Development Company, and $100,000 in each year for the North End Neighborhood Organization. This is all for a total of $1.36 million in 2022 and $1.47 million in 2023 for community partners.
Ms. Naker has a question.
Thanks, Council President. Ms. Mitchell, I'm looking at this slide and the next one. I was struck by the fact that it looks like the amounts go up from 22 to 23, but in looking at our own annual appropriations from our CIB pool for, say, sidewalks or pedestrian bicycle infrastructure, those amounts stay the same through 2026. Can you explain why we are proposing the increase in 23 for so many of these?
So the total funding that we have for community development block grants is $4 million each year. So that funding level is the same. The difference between these is just really how it's split up. So going into the next slide where you see the city department projects, there's less funding in 2023 on the city department side, mainly from removing these 2 play areas. So the totals are the same for the 2 years. It's just ends up being a little bit more, the spread changes a little bit.
But I guess I'm just not why is it not the same amount each year? For our partners. Are they doing different things one year to the next, or?
I think really it was about trying to prioritize a number of really good projects and requests, and figuring out the right funding level for these 2 years, knowing that we have 8 million total. But my understanding is that the work of these programs does not change over the 2 years. It's just a matter of what was available and how we were able to prioritize across all of the requests.
So it's just a reallocation of that additional $350,000, because it looks like there's Duluth and Case and Hazel, and then the next year there's Prospect goes on. So there's a $350,000 additional in 2023 that has been basically reallocated throughout the partner and city programs.
Yes, that's correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So on this slide here, we have the funding for city programs. The majority of this funding is for programs within PED, but we also have money for vacant and hazardous building demolition and the 3 play areas, Duluth and Case, Hazel Park, and Prospect Park. So this is a total of $2.66 million in 2022 and $2.2 million in 2023.
Ms. Mitchell, backing up a little bit, can you or anybody who's here tell us a little bit more about the top? Oh, great. I mean, actually the 4, what the heck, how about all of them? The top citywide programs here. I know that there are dollars that we're seeing in the HRA fund. This is the CDBG portion of the dollars that we saw presented in the HRA fund question. And then the second question is, can we just hear maybe a quick elevator speech on each of these programs?
Thank you, Council President. So we're at a challenging spot right now because our analyst who manages the CDBG project just left us for a bigger and better things in Washington, D.C. So we may have to come back with some answers on more details around these projects. And I don't think we have anybody from PED on the call today, but we can certainly follow up with some more details here. Director McCarthy, is there anything else you would add to that?
Council President Bremont, I think the best bet would be for us to provide a response on these. I will note that there are short descriptions on each of these in the budget book on each of these programs and how they are, what each go towards. But I think that our best response would be to provide a follow-up with more details on this without having staff here to answer it this morning.
Okay, and that's fine. I definitely want to see that. I guess what I'm asking for, like, at this very moment then, and then I'll look for the follow-up, is, like, for example, Citywide Inspiring Communities program. I know that there is a $2 million allocated to inspiring communities in the HRA budget. Is this $300,000 in addition to or part of that $2 million?
Yep. Council President Brenman noted, and we'll make sure that we layer on how this is part of or in addition to HRA budget allocations as well, and how it supports that HRA work.
Okay, and I'll read up on what the citywide acquisition program is, what the multi-unit housing program is, what the homeowner improvement loan program is, and the 30% AMI housing program is in the meantime. Mr. Tolbert, did you have a hand up?
I did until you asked my question. So,
oh, what did I ask?
For the clarification, I want the same clarification. Is this in addition or already reflected in the HRA budget?
Yeah, and thank you. And I just apologies on. We've had several budget updates from HRA, and I think we're just trying to get a real clear understanding, especially because there's a strong interest and commitment from the council on affordable housing investments. But also recognizing that there's a very firm direct line to ARPA funds and wanting to just appreciate where funds are coming from and if the best sources are being used for them. And in some cases, are we piling up funds in programs that haven't been able to get dollars out the door? So we'll look forward to that information. And if we could get that as soon as possible, we'd appreciate that. We're running out of time in our budget process. So thank you very much.
All right, absolutely. We will get that to you as soon as we can. So continuing on, finally here, just a reminder that under the process redesign that we did a couple of years ago, we are alternating between city department project years and community process years. So coming up in 2022, we have the second community process. Still has $1 million pot of money to be allocated over 2 years. On the right-hand side of this slide, you can see the projects that were funded with that pot of money in 2020 and 2021. And we will have, we're working on the details of that process right now, and we'll have additional information on that in the coming weeks. So Council President Brandmo and council members, that is all I have for you today, and I am ready for any additional questions you have. Thank you.
Thanks. It's like, get it done. And I appreciate also this switch we've made to having an allocated portion of the CIB dollars that are part of the community process, recognizing that these are smaller requests, but looking at this and I guess on behalf of Mr. Tao and myself, just really appreciating the investments that we see here on, Charles and Rice, Charles speed humps, the Lighton Park, Lewis Park. These are investments that are very important to the lower part of North End, where we have seen some concentrated gun violence and other behavior that is less than desirable and challenging. And so these lighting and investments definitely make an impact on that in those focused areas. So I really appreciate that those resources through the community process were allocated to these areas. And I'm looking at, the remaining things that I didn't mention and recognizing similar commitment to equity investments. So I appreciate that. Are there questions? We have more questions that we have for Ms. Mitchell or any of the folks that are on the call here today. Great. It looks like you've answered our questions. I know there's some follow-up that we'll look for responses to in short order. We appreciate that commitment to getting information back to us as well. Anything else from my colleagues on CIB? All right. Ms. Mitchell, Ms. Bernock, it looks like you're adjourned. We're not, but you are. Thank you very much for your help here today. If there's anything we need to know before you close out, looking at you, no?
Nope, all good.
Okay, thank you so much for your information.
Thank you.
Okay, and thanks for folks who were here and available to answer our questions. We appreciate you as well. All right, so now I am looking to Ms. Houston. Just to make sure, do we have other items on our agenda today, or is it just time for the Holly Houston budget update moment?
Council President Brandmo, council members, thank you. That was our only item on our agenda today. So as mentioned, next week we will be hearing more details on the 5-year street plan before we adopt that plan in tandem with the budget in December. And then we'll also be hearing an update just on the debt plan around the 5-year street plan. And then the following week, so we're into November 17th, we will be having our final presentations from the fire department on one of their programs that we requested more details on. I'm going to get the name wrong, but the social worker program.
First responder, yep.
Yeah, thank you.
And well, there's another name that we are committed to not remembering for some reason, so that's fine.
And then we'll be hearing about the property tax relief program that the mayor proposed. So,
can I just say, for the benefit of my colleagues and folks that are tuning in today, last night the city voters chose to pass a rent control stabilization initiative, and as I'm mentioning this not off the script of our budget meeting conversation, but on the script. Last week, we had asked the administration for a summary of a potential budget around this program, and we were unable to get that information. We also asked our city attorney's office for information about implementation dates and when we would possibly be able to make changes and what sort of changes we were going to be able to make. And we got some answers, but this morning on the city's website, there's already published a web page about that answers many of those questions definitively. And so I think it'd be very appropriate next Wednesday to have the city attorney's office and our finance department come back with information that clarifies our city's legal position on this amendment and potential budget impacts and implementation costs. We are passing the 2022 budget without that information. And I think that's really a shame. We need to have that information. At this point, it looks like the initiative went into effect immediately. So with that in mind, I'm not sure what enforcement or processes are in place to handle this new initiative, but we certainly need to know that, especially as we walk into the final weeks of our budget decision. So if we can add that to our discussion next Wednesday, I would, and I know that my colleagues as well would appreciate this information. Mr. Tolbert.
Yeah, I'm wondering if next week might be too long to wait. You know, we've been asking for what implementation would look like for a month. The city attorney's office came and gave us answers. The administration said they were not prepared, but went live with the website within 12 hours of the vote, you know, the polls being closed. So I wonder if it sounds like they might be prepared to at least put together what their proposed implementation is going to look like. I don't know. I think it's disappointing that you know, this didn't come to us last week as we had asked, and it's not like we asked spur of the moment. But do you think we should ask for a report this afternoon and to be ready to come back with the full report next week? I just am. I mean, I like being prepared. I like having a place to point people to questions, but a website this prepared so quickly is just, considering how little answers we had a week ago.
Well, and that our voters went to the polls without those answers is troubling to me as well. We'll make a request to bring that item in under suspension to get a preliminary update today. I appreciate that friendly amendment to the suggestion and get as much information as we can today, and then with a follow-up next week at our budget meeting. I think it's imperative that we have a clear understanding of budget implications and where exactly, if there are dollars attached to it, which maybe there aren't, where that money will be coming from. We have set the levy limit without, you know, anticipating that this cost would be part of it. So we've got trouble. Ms. Prince has a hand up.
And to that point, thank you, Council President Brenmon and Council Member Tolbert. To that point, I have received an email already this morning from a developer whose bank is asking hard questions, and it is pending closing, and it may be putting this immediately at risk. So we really are going to have to deal with this immediately. I just can't state strongly enough that yeah, we are going into this in the dark, and it is definitely putting our pending projects at risk.
All right. We will alert the administration that we'll be bringing this item in under suspension for a full update to get as much information as is available to us now, not only for our budget, but also just for our knowledge. It sounds like this has economic development impacts, and so just to be clear, and again, we just need the information. We're trying to make very important decisions about the 2022 budget right now, and we need to be informed. And again, a shame that our voters went to the polls without information that appeared to be at hand hours later. So, all right, let's see. So Holly, we got a summary from you. Talked a bit about our a ballot initiative from last evening. And so I think we have reached the end of today's agenda. And so if there's nothing else to come before us, We will be adjourned until later today. Thanks, folks.